Welcome to this webinar series, part of COVID-19 Bands at the Conservatory, the semester that we're leading 11 sessions on various topics. Tonight, we're going to be discussing cultural sensitivity in the arts, a subject that I know many of us care profoundly and deeply about. We've invited, Joe and I have invited some amazing friends that we love that we think will offer great insight into this for all of us. And I'm going to turn it over to Joe right now to introduce our amazing colleagues and professionals that we've invited.
Thank you, Steve. And I am delighted that we have a panel that has more experience than I could imagine we could get for an event like this. So thank you. We're even in different time zones. I think we got East, Middle. I mean, this is great. So I'm going to introduce everybody, and I just want you to kind of wave to our folks that don't know you. So the first person I'd like to introduce is Beth Peterson. She is a professor at the University of Illinois, where she wears a few hats. She conducts band and is a music education faculty member. Beth, say hey to our folks.
Hey, folks.
I've known Beth for a while. She and her husband were iconic music education faculty at Ithaca, and then Illinois stole you all away. We stole this person away, Mitch Butler, to come and direct our jazz studies department. And he is currently wearing that hat, a fabulous trombonist and jazz artist. And we are delighted, Mitch, to have you on this panel with us.
Thank you.
And you are not in Kansas City right now either. You are in South Carolina, right? So, and then lastly, a colleague that Steve and I have known for quite a long time, and we love her and have had her on our faculty and shared in conducting symposia with her. She is fabulous dance choreographer, but then was stolen away to that place in Oregon where she is now the dean, and they are so fortunate to have you, Sabrina Madison-Cannon. Welcome back with us. Uh-oh, she's disappeared. I think I scared you, Sabrina. There you are.
Hello.
Did I scare you away? I was like, oh no. Well, we are thrilled, as I mentioned up front, to have you all. And the questions that were generated that you've seen came from about 130 of our students who are on this virtual opportunity this semester. And these are the questions that came to the surface the most when we read all of those. And we certainly appreciate you using your wisdom and knowledge to help gain some more information for us and all our students. Some of the topics will be, I mean, they're sensitive topics, and we really appreciate that. So what we're going to do is, once I turn it over to Steve, he will start with a specific person to address a question, and then the panel can certainly chime in as you see fit. So Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Joe. So the first question that our students submitted is, how can one best spread positivity and awareness of social issues in the music world, especially right now? And we can replace that word music with the arts world, because Sabrina, we know your background is dance, so that's fine. But just how can we spread positivity of social issues through the art world, especially right now? Sabrina, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I think I want to start by saying that I think that positivity and awareness are very different things. So I think by focusing the work that you do on things that are relevant to the times, and that things that are salient to you and that will resonate with the population of people that you serve, either serve through an educational mission or through a community mission, I think that's creating awareness. I think the positivity piece has more to do with how you frame discourse around these conversations. And so I think that if we can create spaces where people can come together and have honest conversation, we can make these safe spaces so that people that maybe aren't as culturally aware can feel comfortable to ask what they think is maybe an inappropriate question or a bad question without getting jumped on, right? So that they can feel open to learning. And then those of us that have been experiencing issues around cultural competency can also help to guide people throughout those conversations. And I think that's how we create the positivity piece of this.
Awesome. Beth, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was sort of the geek who, when you all asked me to be part of this panel, I looked up the definition of cultural sensitivity, because I think we all know what it means for us. But I wanted to just put that out there, maybe at the top of this meeting. And this is an internet definition, but the internet says, being aware that cultural differences and similarities between people exist without assigning them a value, positive or negative, better or worse, right or wrong. And I think that is the challenge maybe for us right now, is sort of finding this, that there isn't one culture or art form that's better than the other. And the other question or other part of this is the right now piece. I think we're all trying right now, especially in academia, to have these conversations. And the fact that you're asking these questions and your students ask so many wonderful questions about the topic, I think is really important. For me, I mean, there's some specific things I do, and I'll share, I think, that later in some other questions. One other thing though, I ran across this over the weekend, and I would ask your students to watch this. It's a YouTube clip with the New York Philharmonic Brass Quintet playing a piece by Anthony Barfield. And the piece is called Harlem, and it's based on a poem by Langston Hughes. And it's a beautiful thing that's happening right now. It's a beautiful poem. And the orchestra, because they can't play in a hall right now, they're moving all over the city in different places and performing these different community outreach pieces. And so students, go watch that. And I can send that clip to y'all later. But I think those are some things we need to be doing right now, having these conversations and understanding that it's maybe we all start here.
Awesome, Beth. And Mitch?
Yeah, I concur with what's been said. And, you know, I think the definition of sensitivity is actually a very important definition in, you know, when being asked this question, because that word and those two words grouped together have a lot of negative connotations in a lot of corners of this country, unfortunately, when really you're just trying to deal with awareness and education. I mean, that's really all you're trying to deal with. And it's seen as a weapon to be used. And so, and I thought Sabrina made a very good point as well, that, you know, the positivity is not necessarily going to be derived from tackling the subjects. But if you can deal with topics, and I know we're going to get into some specificity later, but if you can deal with the topics in an open and honest environment, I think that it goes a long way. And I'll say this as well. This forum and what Beth just mentioned in terms of, especially in the arts, performances, and even though we're, you know, in a pandemic, you know, the way we get around, you know, while we're still safe, but presenting information, presenting creations and works by folks from different backgrounds that might not otherwise be exposed. It's also a good way to disseminate this, you know, the education and create those environments.
So Mitch, you actually touched on the next question, and actually I think this is going to be intertwined, right? These
Right.
questions have several tentacles to them that we're going to hit, and the themes will continue to emerge. But all of us have roles in the classroom or as leadership in some capacity in a program or in a university. So the question that came up for our students is, what can future educators do to take steps to be culturally sensitive and aware? Now, you've mentioned some, but I'm just curious, you know, and let's again refresh everybody's, here's who's on this panel. Mitch is a jazz educator, okay? Sabrina is a dance choreographer, artist, teacher, and now a dean. And Beth is a conductor, music educator, wind band world. And so you've got a really good cross section of different things that people do. So Mitch,
Right.
What are steps that educators can take to be culturally sensitive in the classroom from your perspective?
Well, I try not to take too long with this. I think the very first thing that you can do is get to know people from different backgrounds. And I know that seems like a simple answer to the question, but let's dig into that a little bit. Like, what do we know as, some of the most segregated time in American society? Sundays, church, right? And what are some of the more culturally like provocative movies that we know? Things like, guess who's coming to dinner, things like that, right? Our time that we spend, the time that you spend with other folks, getting to know other folks, is a slogan, but very rarely do we actually do that. There's it's not just the typical apprehension of, going to someone's house, and this is obviously pre-COVID and hopefully soon to be post-COVID, but going to someone's house for dinner, it brings up all kinds of apprehensions just in general. But certainly once we begin to do that cross-culturally, right? And so a lot of times when I'm teaching my ensembles, there's these musical concepts that we're trying to deal with, and I'm dealing with kids who have never been to mass, or kids that have never been to, a Black church, an African American Methodist Episcopal Church, AME church, or something to that effect, or like here in the South, a Southern Baptist church. And you can talk about this and that and the other, but until you experience something, it is hard to fathom what the what the topic is. And so I think I've done some guest lecturing in music education classes before, and one of the things I always talk about is experience what it is that you're trying to convey from a musical standpoint, but where does it come from? As an educator, you must know where something comes from. So it is about experiencing other things that we get outside of our comfort zone. So that's really a big part of that. My experience, I've been lucky. I think most of us here on the screen have been lucky. We've lived in different places. We've lived in the North and the South and the East and the West. For me personally, I've been blessed. I've been at HBCUs. I've been at state institutions. I've been at private institutions with high academic standards. I've been all over the place, and so you do get to know different cultures. And it has been one of the most valuable experiences, aside from the teaching itself. It's just being in different places and getting to know different people. So seems like a slogan, but it really is important.
No, before I let Beth jump in, first of all, when COVID's over, eggplant parmesan at my house. That's going to be unique, I bet.
I'm down.
and then number two, the theme I hear you continuing to kind of profess through that is the courage to step out of a comfort zone. I appreciate that. That's good, really good advice. Beth,
It's a great transition because as you were talking, Mitch, I was thinking about how I come to music education and the band room as a white band director, and that's my culture. That's all I've known. So I'm trying really hard to learn other things and push myself to figure out how to make my rehearsal space inclusive and loving and safe for everybody. And band directors have a bad reputation for being those taskmasters who literally stand on a podium and tell everybody what to do. And we were taught that way. So part of that is changing that culture and to collaborate with the students, get to know the students, where are they coming from? And yet still balancing that with expectations to make great music every day, right? So that's sort of what's always swirling around in my brain, especially now. I think some specific things that we can do as future educators, and we talked about this a little bit before we started taping, asking students their pronouns. and calling students by the names they want to be called. The name on the roster might be different than the name they want to be called, and you have to learn that. Little things, I was just interviewing a young teacher, and he was saying he carries a backpack and he makes sure he has a rainbow keychain that sticks out of his backpack on purpose. So students know that he's an ally, and they can talk to him and they can seek him out. So specific things like that, you know, putting books in your office where students know that you're reading certain things and you are working on your own understanding of cultural sensitivity. I have one other example that I'll share, which is something I just learned, and I just did this. We did a piece that was called American Tapestry, and it's a COVID piece for me because it was a chamber piece. And the piece is based on 3 folk tunes from American history, and just the title American Tapestry made me nervous. And I don't know that a year ago I would have thought that, but it made me nervous. And I thought, I've got to figure out what are the words in these folk songs and where are these folk songs from? 2 of the 3 folk songs are about lost love. You know, someone goes off to war, they're never going to see their love again. But the 3rd folk song, when I did a little research, was a minstrel song. And I think the words were horrible and inappropriate. And I was too far into score study to not do the piece, which is, I'm sorry to say, but it was the bad excuse is it's COVID and we were all trying to figure out what to do with our students like right away. So I read the first 2 folk tunes with my students and I said, I can't play through the 3rd tune. I don't believe that's appropriate. I can't stand here and tell you I love all people and Black Lives Matter, and I'm going to play this tune anyway. And so I contacted the composer and he rewrote the ending. And he was horrified when he learned what the words of the tune were. Wow. So I think those are some specific things we can do to move forward, to be culturally sensitive to students and set good examples for how we're teaching and what we're doing.
You know, again, courage, quest to learn and gather information and make intelligent decisions. I think that's really good advice. Sabrina?
Yeah, I think Beth, her sentiments are a good segue into what I was going to say in terms of inclusive teaching. And I think instructors can be intentional about including resources and perspective from a spectrum of voices. It helps you know that all students are feeling included in that educational experience. I think that when you're having discussions, making sure that all students are being heard. So, you know, research will tell you that students from underrepresented areas will be less likely to stand up and advocate for themselves. And so pulling them out to, you know, so that they don't necessarily have to always self-advocate when there's a discussion, especially when there's a discussion around race. I think making sure that students aren't afraid to ask questions about things that they may not have experienced. And then getting to what Mitch said, there's a lot of things that we haven't experienced that we don't feel as confident about teaching. So I think broadening our own experiences that then we can bring into the classroom, I think that's all a part of making this sort of, I'd like to say cultural competency beyond cultural sensitivity, right? Making us really prepared to be able to educate these students for a more culturally competent experience.
That is so, I mean, you're right on the money. Last year we were asked to reconsider some of the things, some of the material in jazz history. I restructured the class, and it became, you know, I really encourage the students to, you know, present and talk a lot more than just me reading down the notes and talk blah, 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 blah. So we did that, and when we got to our 4th topic for the semester, it was entitled Jazz and Race. And I had, you know, by the end of the 3rd topic, I'd finally gotten the students to talk, and, you know, we were, you know, having really nice conversation, and we got to that subject and it was crickets for the first couple of classes. And it's like, okay, I know that you know, we're uncomfortable talking about this subject, but it is as plain as day, and it is as American as apple pie. So it's time for us to get unafraid and talk about what it is that, you know, we know, don't know, feel comfortable with, don't feel comfortable with. And that is really half the battle of getting outside of the comfort zone. You know, the word courage, we all have to deal with it, you know. You know, we all have to deal with it. And so, yeah, Sabrina, you're right on the money. And Beth, I'll just say, you know, I just applaud, you know, you know, not just being aware, but taking action. And even if you had played the piece, knowing what it is, and I know we're going to get into the subject, so I don't want to say too much about it, but knowing what it is and still, you know, even if you had done that, I think the awareness is really half the battle, or 90% of the battle.
Beautiful.
Well, I'm going to just jump in and say to all of you, like a week or 10 days ago, I had contacted Joe and Steve and I said, I can't be on this panel. I don't know anything about this topic. And as we started to talk, I realized, okay, if I don't know, I can at least approach this from what I don't know. I'm trying to learn these things, and I have tons of questions. So if nothing else, to the students out there, you got to keep asking and keep talking and keep trying, and taking that risk. So yeah, and Mitch, for me, it's like, am I going to say the wrong thing? You know, and the white fragility thing. I don't want to offend or be wrong. But so we got to try. So thanks for your patience with me.
Absolutely, it's, yeah.
Just as when I work with our grad students in conducting and they are given a new piece to learn from me, and I ask them not to form opinions on it. I just ask them to objectively describe it to me, like just listen to hear instead of listening to respond, and allowing yourself the time and space to ponder and think and reconcile a different perspective. And I think we all grow through those different perspectives. Mitch alluded to earlier, and I think it's beautifully stated. I've always believed that exposure and education are the way that we can get out of most perils in society, and if it's presented in the right way. So one of the things about steps that future educators can do to be culturally sensitive in the classroom is, it's obvious, but I think the things we choose to use as examples, and who we model, and what repertoire we play, and who it's written by, and I mean, 1,000 different variables, sexual orientation, and everything that it makes us so beautiful as a large community of people. I think those are all. How in the end is that not going to make the world a more beautiful together place? Of course,
that's right.
That's how the outcome. It will be a natural evolution of that. I'm happy that these conversations are going on. It doesn't mean they're easy. It's terribly difficult if you look like me. I'm with Beth in that. These are scary things, but we have to be brave. We ask our students as artists to be vulnerable, and we have to be willing to risk learning and appreciating and valuing. I think that's what it all comes down to. And then, then we're all the better for it. I think we'll get into this some more, of course. This is a great question that came directly from one of our students. We didn't reword this in any way. I'm going to send this to Beth first. How do we engage artists? So back to the modeling I just brought up. I think it set this up nicely. If we're choosing models, how do we choose models if we want to have models that don't look like me, like Brahms, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart at all? How do we engage people without making them feel like they're the benefactors of tokenism, but solely chosen for their merits? And Beth, I'm going to send this to you first.
Well, but chosen for their merits. To me, that's the piece. And so don't say to the person you've hired, I hired you because you're a girl and I really wanted a girl guest conductor, which I've gotten many times. And so, because that makes that person feel, as much as you try not to, that they're not as good as everybody else. And I can't do it as well as that other person. Or in some cases, and I'm sorry to white men, but sometimes to the older white guy who's sort of being condescending about giving this girl an opportunity, right? That doesn't happen that much anymore. It's getting better and people understand that. At the same time, I hear you, Steve. I mean, women are wannabe band directors or orchestra directors or conductors or dancers or jazz directors. And so they also need to have people who look like them as models. And I take that seriously. And in taking that seriously, then I believe it's my job, if I'm the person hired for that gig or that guest conducting opportunity, to do the best job I can. And hopefully the next time that person asks me back, they're asking me because I did a good job, or they're recommending me to someone else because I did a good job. So that's on me. So part of me gets frustrated that we still ask the question, but I'm also glad that we're talking about it, because I think, there were times not too long ago, we probably weren't even talking about it. Again, it's talking about all these things, right? In the end, I try not to get too worked up about it. I mean, I'm going to go do the best job I can. And if someone says something to me about, hey, I hired you because a girl, you're fine, great. I'm going to show you that I can do just as good a job as anyone else. So,
Mitch?
Yeah, Beth, I think that last point is really salient. Like, even if I felt that way, if I were hired as a guest conductor or something like that, part of that's on me. Part of it's on me. I'm going to take the opportunity, and I'm going to, especially when I was a, younger jazz director, coming up in.
You're only 28, Mitch.
Yeah. That's what these gray hairs tell you.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. That's
but when I was, especially when I went out to California, teaching at Cal State, so that's a long story. The school had a long history, but it had some down times. And so when we were trying to build the program again, we would go to places where there were other bands, and I'm from, West Hill, North Carolina. They didn't know, want me from a can of paint. And, you just do the best job that you can. Then they go, that was all right, and so, that's why I say part of that is on me, and if I felt that way, but it also is, which actually that mini story brings up this point. In order to, not make someone feel like they're the part of token, is to know their merits. Is to know their merits. When I was in college, 25 years ago, William Grant Still was a name that was very popular to bring up as we're going to do this piece for African American, for Black History Month. And that was the only name. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people use the name, use that had been passed down, and so they did Still. Let's do Still. We'll do Still next year, and but nobody knew the quality of his work, and so that was part of the problem, and that feeling was that people weren't actually studying the work as they would study a Brahms, the Third Symphony of Brahms or something. They know that in and out, but still, okay, we'll do this. And so that's part of it. Know the merits of the people that you're trying to get to know, and I think that really does go a long way. And then again, like I say, if I've ever felt that way, I just try to do the, like Beth said, the damn level best I can. And that usually kind of goes away, both internally and externally.
Beautiful. Sabrina?
I think I'm going to take more of an institutional leadership perspective on this question and say that I feel like if our institutions, if the mission and the vision really embody diversity and inclusivity, and so guest artists see that in our curriculum, in our programming, and our recruiting efforts, right? And in our initiatives that we're trying to launch. So maybe we haven't gotten that far down the track, but we're really putting some effort behind certain initiatives. Then they know that they're a part of a greater fabric and not just a token toward that. So I think that that's really important. And I think, all of us in here probably have felt at some point marginalized by who we were, who we weren't in some way. even Professor Davis, I'm sure at times, in his life has felt like maybe I didn't get this opportunity for the reasons that I should have gotten this opportunity. So I can echo and appreciate what Beth and Mitch are saying about you do your level best and you show people that it's about the whole package that you bring. But I think our institutions need to do a better job of not waiting for a moment to make a statement and not waiting for a moment to make a change, but to look at what do we think we value. And I think the last point I want to make on this is when we talk about hiring, it's interesting. When we talk about general hiring, it is the perception is that we're going to look for the very best person. As soon as we talk about narrowing that hiring, we don't have enough women in X field, or we don't have enough people of color in X field. The question that comes up is, well, you're not suggesting that we put quality behind that. And so, I would just caution us as we're having these conversations that, quality is never anything that we're going to question, right? That's going to be, we're not going to put someone in front of our students that we don't value in some way. So I think that we just need to kind of, make stronger statements about that.
I actually think you may have answered the next question a bit. So that no, it's beautiful because as again I said, this is like a Venn diagram of cultural competency with all of us in the middle. Notice I used your word there. I'm going to steal it.
I didn't make that up, but
I like it. Well, okay. So if we're all looking at our what we do each and every day, and Sabrina, maybe you can even look at the dance world because I think there's some marginalized things there that maybe some people don't realize as well. But I mean, what does cultural sensitivity look like in your respective fields? So, I mean, Sabrina, you actually really did a nice job of answering that from an institutional perspective. But do you want to elaborate, or do you just like, no, I think I hit it? But I mean, where are you on that as maybe dean or even as an artist in the dance world?
Yeah, so I don't know that it's field specific.
Right.
I think that even outside of the arts, I think no matter what we're talking about, if we start with mission and vision of who we want to be. So the thing that drives me a little crazy sometimes is when we're having conversations about reflecting our communities and someone says, well, in X community, there's only this percentage of Latinx people. So we're okay, or we're almost there. And, I always turn the conversation around to, but what do we want to be? Who do we want to be? What do we want to reflect? That's more important than how many X type of people live in Kalamazoo, Michigan, right? Or wherever you happen to be. So for me, I think it's about if we can keep pulling things back to mission and realizing that research is really strong in saying that when we've got a diverse environment of people and voices, we have stronger, healthier organizations, right? So there's value there. There's empirical data that talks about that value there. So if we embrace that idea and we embrace those values, then I don't know that we have to work as hard to sort of create these big, bold initiatives and statements. It's something that we walk every day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
I answered your question.
I appreciate her point about it. It's not field specific, but I'm curious. Is Mitch, where are you at?
Well, actually, I wanted to ask Sabrina a question.
Sure.
How do you? I guess the easy question is, how do you deal with that? How do you make an institution, value diversity, cultural sensitivity is what we're I guess our umbrella, but I'm really thinking about diversity, right? And how, what kind of changes can be made to reflect, that value, I mean, I guess that's the easiest way to ask that question from your experience.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of different things. I mean, you could start with data, right? People sometimes respond to this data shows that these types of institutions are healthier, more productive, all of this. And you could start with that. I think the other piece of this, though, is to look at the sort of the globalization of all of our fields. And if we want our students to be successful in this world, we want them to be able to interact with all different kinds of people. And I don't know that there is a faculty member on the planet that would argue against that with you. I think that generally what a person might say it's and this isn't one of the questions, but I'll just go there. I think sometimes what people might say is, well, I don't see color, or I welcome everyone, or right. And we realize that that's in many ways, okay, maybe you don't think you're being racist, but you're certainly not being anti-racist in saying that, right? You're not being intentional about being inclusive in your language. So I think sort of shifting people's mindset to, do you want this orchestra to fully reflect the world? And do you want these students to be able to embrace different cultures and different ideas, right? Part of what what I love about ensemble directors so much is they touch every part of the institution, right? Even musicians will touch dance in that way, right? So I think that they have an opportunity to make a really big impact. So if you start to have those conversations with the people about, what are we trying to do here? What are our values around this? Then I think the natural follow-up conversations will take you down the path that you want to go to.
I think the interesting thing you said is, people say, well, I don't see color, or, and you mentioned that maybe Steve has felt this. I mean, I know I have felt it. And people make assumptions based on just what they see and what they believe, and like, oh, well, you're from here, and that is also an awareness that some people just, it seems like a natural response. Oh, well, and that's it. So I have felt it, and I know we can all reflect on that. So the depth of this conversation is so helpful to just unpack some of the things that we all need to be aware of. So Beth, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave you. Do you have a follow-up on this?
I have a question, I guess, for everybody. And
yeah,
I'm going to take like what Sabrina said, sort of about
sure,
institution to do an ensemble. That's what I do, and I know some of you do that on this panel too. But using music and using the music you program, and using the way you program and what you do, using that to teach your students about these issues, right? And so it's programming. I guess I'm not asking a question anymore. I'm giving you my opinion, but do you all see this, or is this a way to use music, that what you pick and how you teach it and how you talk about the story behind that piece that a BIPOC composer composed? Isn't that what we should be doing to help in some ways communities that are really white and maybe resistant to this? Can we use music to change?
Yeah, I think all of the arts, I think we're perfectly poised to help sort of bring people to ideas and conversations that are difficult to have just verbally many times. And we're able to set the stage and sometimes not always, but maybe sometimes make an environment that's more open to the conversation. That's my thinking.
Yeah, and I think the music itself, well, as a music person, I think the music itself definitely can be used that way. And I'll just give you a very quick example. It's, you talk about assumptions, Joe. I mean, to me, it's not negative. It makes me smile, obviously, and laugh a little. But some of the charts that I'll pull sometimes in different places surprises my students. And so just about everywhere I've been, I've always tried to pull out a Benny Goodman tune. And so I kid, and jazz is a little different, American art form, a lot of African American pioneers. So the kids are aware of this, but I'll pull out Benny Goodman and say, you want to play Benny Goodman? Yeah. I want to play Benny Goodman. The charts are great. and the band was swinging. And let me tell you a little bit of something about it. And I use that as an educational experience. Did you know Fletcher Henderson was his main arranger? Well, first I have to say, some of them say, well, who's Fletcher Henderson? And then you say, okay, all right, well, Fletcher Henderson had the first big band that we know of, right? And he was an African-American musician. And so, oh, and he was with Benny Goodman in the 30s? Yes. And did you know that Benny Goodman had the first well-known integrated band? Okay, all right. Wow, there was there were people. Yes, that's right. So, and then you also use that as teaching for the greater community. You take that piece, you play that at the concert. The people you say, oh, Benny Goodman had the first integrated band. Oh wow, didn't know that. You put that information in their laps, and hopefully you do some good with it. And that's part of what we do. So Beth, you're right on the money, I think.
I think not to be a completely data driven, although data is to me objective. And in 2017, we hosted the CPDNA National here, and there were countless conversations going on about this, how many composers were written by females and every other gender and versus males. And when I started to see the grave disparity, and I knew it was bad. I had no idea how bad it was. And and again, as Beth was mentioning earlier, we just what's but at that moment when you're exposed to that, again, back to exposure and education. I went to that session at Shimon and when I saw these stats coming up on the screen, I was mortified. And at that moment, I have a choice, right? So now we're into the bean counting. How is this going to get better if someone in a position of leadership, like myself and like Joe and like Beth and like all of us, frankly, we have choices we can make, right? And we can make choices, tangible choices with intentionality that can help us along to a more equal both opportunity and outcome scenario, right? And a couple years ago, 4 years ago, at that 2017, I had some really long and hard talks with myself, and I said, this is interesting, and this is, I haven't ever admitted this in public, but I will right now. I started doing what I thought was the right thing by changing the paradigm of repertoire and balancing through all kinds of different diverse lenses, but I never told anyone. Now, the reason I wasn't coming forward and wasn't saying it was because I didn't want it to seem as if it was pandering or if it was inauthentic or insincere. So I have to tell you that's caused me a lot of strife because I don't want to be I don't want to do the right thing because it's the right thing, and I don't want to, look at me, look what I'm doing. That's never been the intentionality behind it. It's just because when I leave this planet, I want it to be different than where it is right now. And once I was exposed to that, it's required me, if I'm a thoughtful person, to make some substantial changes. So in our field, gender, it's a lot more white guys than everything else. That's a problem. Composers, a lot more white guys than anything else. And we have gender stereotypes on instruments, flute players and tuba players and percussion players. So as far as an opportunity to make very tangible, very easy to measure outcomes, we're in the perfect field for that in many ways because we're so pathetic in so many methods, So I look forward to being part of that. I know all of us will be. That's why we're doing it. I hope. Mitch, we'll start with you. Let's switch channels. Do you have a role model whose programming or teaching guides your work?
Definitely Bobby Watson. I mean, that starts with him because I've gotten to work with him and see him do what he does. And I've gotten to know the man, and he exudes, all of the qualities, especially in this area, that we want from our educators and our mentors and our inspiration. I will also say my my first trombone professor, his name was George Broussard, was not lost on me that, I was a 19, 20, 21, 22, 23-year-old young black male from North Carolina, and he was a 60-something-year-old man from Lake Charles, Louisiana, and a white man from Louisiana, and I loved him like family. And then finally, my first jazz director, Carol DeShiel. I think some of you guys might have met him when he was here for a brief moment with Bobby's send-off concert last year. Certainly, the way I teach jazz history, the way I approach the music, definitely, especially in this area, really shaped and guided how I to this day crave experiences from other places and from people that aren't weren't raised like me. He really taught me the value of that, and so those are three people that come to mind.
Wonderful. Sabrina?
Wow. I hate to name people because then you always feel like you leave somebody out. One thing I will say, I'll name one person, I'll tell you that, because Joan Myers Brown, who is the founder and still executive artistic director of the Philadelphia Dance Company, Philadanco, which was my the professional experience that I had. I didn't even realize when I was studying under her how amazing she was. She never talked about herself, and she never talked about her journey and how difficult it was trying to study ballet in segregated Philadelphia, where she would stand outside of the ballet studio and the girls that would take class would come out and teach her the things. And she would just happen to be very incredibly talented and tenacious. So she started a school, and then she started a company because she realized I'm training all of these young dancers who have nowhere to dance. And so she started a company that was meant to be just sort of a regional outlet for young dancers in Philadelphia. And fast forward to many years later, 20 or so years later, when I got a chance to study there, and it was an amazing, nationally and internationally known organization. And whenever I see her, and she's in her 80s now, and you would never know it. This woman is a force to be reckoned with. I mean, she is just still going strong. And I keep saying, when are you going to retire? She said, until I find someone who can take all of this over. There's nowhere to, I shouldn't be going anywhere. But so she's someone that inspires me as a dancer, as an artist, as an administrator, as an educator. She's just a really amazing woman.
Yes.
My answer might be a little bit different because I look at who is inspiring me right now to ask these questions and program differently. And for me, my role model, and I know that Steve and Joe, you'll know her, is Cindy Johnson Turner. I mean, she is so willing to take risks and be vulnerable and ask the right questions. And I just had a conversation with her yesterday, and she was asking questions like, why do we exist and how is band relevant? So those are really important things to ask right now. And she's coming up with some answers that I think are pushing things forward. So I really respect her and what she's sharing with us. And then for me, and this would be for the music educators out there, there are just some resources I like to use to help us find music and program with more diversity in mind, and groups like andwewereheard.org and the Institute for Composer Diversity. You don't know about those, make sure you check those out.
Joe?
Beth, this question probably was the most asked in some kind of manner or other. And, we were like, okay, this has got to, I mean, we look at the history books and we know that there are artists and composers who are historically racist. How do we talk? Do we play their music? Do we dance their stuff? What do we do? I mean, Yeah, that was a question that comes up from the students. How do you approach speaking about these people and programming their music?
One of the, Joe, you had shared some of the questions with me earlier, and one of the questions had to do with, do we celebrate composers who we know were racist? And so that's really important, because that my answer to that would be no, we don't celebrate. But what does the word celebrate mean? If it means an entire concert of Percy Granger's music, no, I don't think we do that. I don't think we would do that anyway, maybe. And for right now, for me, it's about the student's comfort level. If my students are not comfortable doing a piece by a person who was racist, I'm not going to make them do that right now. Maybe there's an opportunity to talk about that. I think we've already mentioned that. You talk about that person and what their contributions were or are, or why that's great music. In a more specific example, there's a piece called Irish Tune from County Derry by Granger, and in a conducting class, it's a great piece for young conductors to learn how to start a piece of music on beat 2. And that's a hard thing to be able to do, right? Like, you have to have a lot of impulse of will to get the musicians to start. We were doing that in a conducting class I teach this semester, and I just said, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to do that piece because I don't know that we're ready to talk about that. And then in the next chapter, I said to the students, pick a piece you've always wanted to do. And one of the students who I thought would be really concerned about doing Granger couldn't decide whether he wanted to do Colonial Song or Shepherd's Hay. So, I like, you pick, you tell me what you're comfortable with. But I think we have to talk about it. And then one other thing I'll share is that just on CBS Sunday Morning this last Sunday, there was a conversation about taking down statues. And do we elevate statues? Do we take them down? And there were two really smart historians there, and they said people are complicated. We need to know our history. We need to be able to talk about it. So I think that's where I'm leaning in the future. I need to talk about those composers and what they did add, and their complicated lives, and what their art gave us. But celebrate, maybe not.
Good wisdom. I really appreciate that. Sabrina?
Yeah, so I probably have a different take on this than you might think. I guess I feel that if we omitted all of the past artists that had racist tendencies, there's so much we would not study. So I look at it more as providing the appropriate historical context, and then the space for students to be able to explore and talk about that. Don't hide what was going on culturally at the time. Talk about why those folks may have had the ideologies that they had. Again, I agree with Beth, not to celebrate that, but that doesn't mean that they didn't create great art at that time, right? And so our students still want to be able to engage them with that, but then be prepared to speak about why it's important to study that person.
May I interrupt you for a second with your dean hat on? We've come across this before. We program a master work and a student said, do you understand the historical context of this particular movement? Now that we know that this information's out there, do you never program it again? Do you pull the student out? I'm going to let you finish, Sabrina, but your point was very well taken. How do we respond when a student feels
so for instance, even if it's not a student, sometimes it's a community. So the Oregon Bach Festival is also under the auspices of my school. And even though we postponed the festival this year, we were programmed to do St. John Passion. And so instead of saying or not saying that there were some complexities around this, we were planning to engage the Jewish community in conversations around it. And then to have panel discussions and, curtain conversations. And, I think that's the better way. Let me not say better. It's more comfortable for me to illuminate the elephant in the room. Let's not walk around it. Let's not look at it. Let's confront it, and let's talk about why this is painful, and then talk about still why we want to engage with it on some level.
Mitch, Sabrina, thank you. I get it. I mean, that's really important that we educate and inform. And I think this is evolutionary. As we keep growing as a community that's aware, I think we all have to be sensitive and look at ways to educate ourselves and our population. Now, Mitch, I'm going to ask you this a little bit. As a jazz educator, where have you seen this?
Um, uh,
Have you seen it?
it's a little different. One thing we know about you know, jazz and segregation is that, you know, after hours, a lot of the musicians would get together and trade, you know, licks and ideas and, you know, that kind of, so it's a little different, but it still was in the world of segregation, certainly, and in America. And so you know, if something is brought to my attention, this kind of, I guess I'm transitioning back to what Sabrina was talking about. If something's brought to my attention, then what I typically do is first I go and say, okay, I didn't know that. Let me go and check this out. And once you find out the information, it's very important to have the conversation, talk about, you know, what was, but if there is value in the music or the work that you're doing, you know, particularly if it's something that had not been done in another area, it's important that this technique be learned or that this composition be tackled, because this is something that you're not going to find anywhere else. And it's a technique that's still used today. So context is really, really, really important. And so I really appreciate Sabrina saying that, because that's the first thing that pops in my head. If you don't do anything by anybody races, you got a lot pretty bare. You know, it could be a barren cupboard. So you have, you know, you have to deal with that. Now, that brings me to something that I was really thinking about when the conversation was going on, and that is cancel culture.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the hot button terms used by, you know, certain folk to dissuade us from having conversations about these kinds of things, or to deter us from, you know, looking at statues and so forth. That Beth had brought that up, and you know, a statue is not history. Okay. Uh, you know, so, you know, anybody that tells you that if you want to remove a statue because that person had, you know, slaves, or had espoused a lot of, you know, anti-human, was what I call it, anti-human opinions. That's a conversation for a community to have, but that doesn't mean that you are erasing history. What you're doing is you're not celebrating. You know, a statue is celebration, right? You know, the Lakers just won the championship. They're gonna put a LeBron statue up. They're celebrating that he won a championship. You know what I mean? That's a celebration. So I think you have to really be determined to you know, to teach the students the difference between you know, celebrating someone who was espousing anti-human opinions versus dealing with the innovations in your art form. I mean, you know, uh, if there's a problem with someone who is a master arranger, and they come out with all of these views, you know, yeah, I won't buy their record, but I can certainly study their score and certainly say, all right, you know, this is, and nobody else is doing this. We need to deal with this technique. So
Can I
you know,
just say that? Oh, I'm so
yeah.
sorry, Mitch.
No, please.
I just wanted to say, reiterate what Beth was saying and amplify that a little bit more. How she mentioned, you know, students being ready for certain conversations or certain material. And I think that's an incredibly student-centric point of view, that we do need to have our finger on the pulse of that, because that'll help to frame these conversations more appropriately. So I wanted to reiterate what you said about that, and I think that's really important.
It's interesting for us as wind conductors because I mean, we grew up with Granger, right? And now we're discovering more and more what a terrible, not a well-intentioned, good person that we would all embrace, right? And here's what's it's so hard in my brain. So we have, can you imagine in today, there's a composer that's writing a piece that we have found out has said the N-word 40 times. And would we program that piece? No, it would never touch a stage. I hope, at least I pray it would never touch a stage, right? However, we go back to the time of Wagner, who was an openly anti-Semitic, 100% against Jews, but people justify that it's okay to play that, including myself in the past. And that is really difficult to reconcile. Why is this okay? Why is this not okay? And then it's just a tricky, slippery slope that causes and then movement that Joe is talking about in Mussorgsky. We grew up with pictures at an exhibition. It's part of the canon, and now we have to really reconcile whether or not we're comfortable doing this or not. And it's not easy. This is not easy. I think Beth's comment about context, and Sabrina talked about context too, and I think about educating people, hearing all perspectives and all sides, and it's hard. It's very difficult, and we're not going to solve it in this conversation. That is for sure. But back to Sabrina's.
Beth, you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I just was going to add, in that whole statue thing, one of the things they said in CBS Sunday Morning is maybe we need to add more statues. So that, and I think that can be a metaphor for us. We have to add more music, and we have to do different art by different people.
Well, that's Beth. One of the things I was going to say about repertoire, and I'll stay out of this, every piece we choose is a piece we're not choosing. So it's an omission in our choice. So we have to just decide who and what we want to be and what we want to say through that. So, okay, we need to move on. We're getting towards the end here, and we still have a few questions, but we'll move on to, what do I want to ask? Joe, do you have something you want to ask?
Yeah, our students want to know about a resource. So instead of just giving us a litany, read this book, go to this podcast, or look at this website. Sabrina?
Well, this was less student focused, although it would work well for students to see this as well. But I would love for every faculty member to pick up this resource. It's called Diversity's Promise for Higher Education, Making It Work. And it's by Dr. Daryl Smith, who actually, I first met Daryl Smith at UMKC. She was there to do some workshops for leadership on campus. And then she's been out at the University of Oregon as well. I've been reading her book, and it's just amazing the way she helps you access conversations around these topics. So I would say that. And if I could just give one other shout out for folks that like to watch TED Talks, Nina Simon has a TED Talk called The Art of Relevance. I don't know, have any of you seen that? I think that's a wonderful one for students, faculty, staff folks to see.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Mitch, the golden resource, gonna solve everybody's problem.
I had
Sabrina, they're all taking notes. Like, wait a minute, I need that.
I was thinking. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm gonna ask you again, Sabrina, because I didn't get.
No worries.
We'll have them in the link to the video.
Yeah, mine. Mine is not nearly as insightful. I
doesn't matter.
Assume as Sabrina's, but I just find any of the conversations that you can find with Jane Elliott, that's always been really helpful when having a conversation. I mean, I don't think I really need to say too much about it.
No, that's
just go to YouTube and look at any of those conversations that she's had or experiments that she pioneered. And it just exposes our own stuff. It's and if you can deal with that, that's a good start, I think.
Thanks, Mitch. Beth?
I'll give you two really quickly. The book, So You Want to Talk About Race? And there's a really great article in the New Yorker. It's 28 minutes if you let them read it to you, which helped me understand it better as they read it to me while I was also reading along. And I can put the link up there. But it's Black Scholars Confront White Supremacy in Classical Music. And it right now kind of addresses all of the issues that all of us are talking about, from students to faculty to administrators in higher education.
Beautiful, beautiful. Steve?
I know that one, Bet. Sabrina, I'm gonna get that from you.
So, I think this conversation could last a good while, but I know that some of the people on the East Coast need to go to bed. So, what are the good things that you've seen? Or I'll give you two options. Then we'll make this the last one. What are some improvements or the awareness that you've seen, or something that you want to just speak about that maybe we haven't covered? Because the students asked great questions, and there was by no way we were going to hit these all. So, optimism of things that you see this is working, or just something you want to share. I'll give it to you that way. So I will start with Mitch.
Well, gosh. Okay. Very quickly, I will say the good things that I've seen. I can start right here, right now. This is, I've never done anything like this in the 20 years in teaching post-secondary education. Never come close to it. Where we have a forum, a panel that students are going to watch and have, discussion and study about. I would love to reconvene at some point and speak directly with them, answer their questions in real time, so that we can, I can recount some stories and some things and take questions from them, because the way they see these subjects is so much different than the way I saw these subjects at their age, and the way my parents saw this subject at their age, and so on and so forth. So I would really be interested in having that back and forth with them. But that leads me to the last good thing I'd say, which is exactly what Steve said. In these rallies and these these voices speaking out, we've never seen them be so multicultural, with people with good intention. All the polling suggests that more people understand that we need to do a lot more work. So I'm optimistic that way. And again, I appreciate you guys doing this today.
Thank you, Mitch. Beth?
I took notes, I wrote notes, and the first thing I wrote down was the Zoom meeting. I mean, the fact that we're here talking about it. So I know Mitch said that. Steve mentioned this a little bit earlier, and it was sometimes a little hard to understand, but he was talking about CBDNA 2017. I think that was a kickstart at UMKC of thinking more about women as minority in our business, and now the urgency is in Black Lives Matter. And I think that's really important. So I think there's really good change. We're not there yet, but the fact that we're talking about this, I know in the band world, we are trying to engage with more BIPOC composers and conductors and get pieces written and perform different works and hear from different voices. I look at a concert program now, and if it's all sort of older music, I can't, like, that just doesn't seem right to me, so those are some positive things, I think, at least in the band world, that are changing.
Thank you, Beth. Sabrina?
I think the positive thing is we've all grown from this, and I'm incredibly proud of all of our students, across the nation. We talked about this a little bit before the recording started, that students are finding their voices around this. They're feeling a lot of agency. They're feeling a responsibility. They're pushing us out of our comfort zones. They're saying, yeah, this is great rhetoric. What are you going to do tomorrow? Or what are we going to do today? And so I know my students are pushing and forcing me be better and to be more accountable around these topics. And so I think that's a positive thing that's coming out of this.
As I think about just this evening, I mean, Steve and I probably spent countless hours discussing the comfort of it. You know, just the comfort of like, okay, we're gonna just try. We're gonna put this out there, and there were some moments of just questioning: is this appropriate? Can we do this? Can we ask these questions? And I think all of you said it with good clarity that we have to be courageous to have these conversations and not to be afraid to plead ignorance, perhaps, when you might. I mean, I think we've all been somewhere where we were walking on eggshells and you may have done something that you didn't intend to do and you offended someone. And I think it's okay to step back and go, you know, I'm so sorry and I had no idea. And please inform me and please teach me. And I've got to be honest that academia has been fruitful for this for me. As a music education professor and a conductor, surrounded by colleagues that are coming in from great institutions as doctoral students that have far more worldly knowledge of how things are changing and how they teach me is immensely refreshing and also challenging. So I'm thankful to all of you because I I believe we chose three people that have at the core of their spirit wanting to grow as a community and help our students grow. And the fact that you took on these questions that our students presented you just speaks to the merit of why we asked you. So I want you to know that from the bottom of my heart, I know I speak for Steve, we couldn't be more thankful for your energy, your wisdom, and your courage to be part of this panel. I'm very thankful.
I don't
Steve?
know. I don't know if I can add much more eloquence to what Jay just stated, but I'm glad that we did this, and I'm hoping that it's been of benefit for everybody that's watching. Sabrina, I know you're out there deaning, and we miss you every day here. I watched, I
Too.
watched, I watched the collaboration that we did actually last night on West Side Story when you did all the great choreography on that, and it made me so proud, just that was such a beautiful endeavor that we did together. And I just miss having you here in the hallway every day and just saying, hey, give me a big old hug. And then just feels the same. And Beth, I think you're one of the shining stars in our profession. And I admire the person you are. I remember sitting at the fireplace in Ithaca when I met you years ago. And I said, who is this? But I just have the highest regard for who you are as a person. And it's, the students in Illinois are so lucky to have you. You're so open-minded and so thoughtful. I think I am as thoughtful as you. I just am not gifted with the words to present them as beautifully as you do. So I've learned that from you today for sure as well. You're right here with us every day, except you're in South Carolina. We're so thankful you joined our faculty, and it's been a great ride watching you lead our jazz program. I think it's one of the finest in the country, and have you at the helm of it with the sensitivities that you have is really inspiring as well. And it's just the last thing I'll say to that Joe mentioned, the students provided so many thoughtful questions. We're very aware that this is an extremely important conversation, and we're happy to have it with you and for you. And our doors are open. Let's talk. Let's make the world a better place, exactly the place we want to see it be. And I think we're all in this together. And none of us can do this alone. All of us can make a difference if we work together, join hands metaphorically, and just actually have some intention behind our actions, and then we can actually help leave the world more beautiful. That's the goal, I hope, for everyone as we walk this earth. So again, thanks to everybody. If you're watching us online, or if you haven't friended us on our YouTube channel or liked our YouTube channel, please do that, because we're going to start really populating it with all kinds of things. We have a big project coming up that we haven't talked about yet, but we're going to be inundating our YouTube channel with upwards to 135 new videos, and I'll explain more about that later, but this is your first teaser of that. So thanks to everybody. Have a great remainder of your day, and sleep well if you've been watching this in the night. We're thankful that you spent some time with us here. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, y'all.